Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the 7 and 7 Show with Zack Ellison. Today, I have with me my good friend, Dan Espinal, who's the co-founder and CEO of Rarebreed Veterinary Partners. And Dan's got quite an extensive background doing many things over the years. So Dan, I'd love to hear your story and help share with the audience how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as it relates to animal health, Zach, the first, I think, really profound interaction I had with animals was overseas as a commander of an embedded training team in Afghanistan. I was an infantry officer about 2008 and commanded 10 U.S. soldiers, and we were fully embedded with about 150 Afghans, and got to observe the relationship between locals and local dogs, which is in stark contrast to the way we kind of engage with the local canines. Um, there was no mutual understanding of shared value. Meanwhile, for us, we gave them names, we gave them shelter, Zach, and more importantly, they made us feel like we were at home. And I sort of realized then that, the more we understand about the way our own minds work, the more value we'll see in the human-animal bond. But not only that, I do believe you can measure the affluence of a society by how it treats its companion animals. And for me, just as a business, I love these kind of underlying fundamentals where demand outweighs supply. And this was one that's always been kind of near and dear to my heart. So fast forward a little bit, back in the U.S., did some management consulting for AT Cardi spinoff. Went to business school at MIT Sloan, specialized in financial engineering there. Thought I wanted to be a Wall Street trader. That's where we met, if you remember, a short stint in capital markets, the sales and trading desk at Deutsche Bank. I was on a rates derivative desk, and quickly realized that maybe that wasn't for me right then, but I wanted the ability to create value and be the master of my own destiny. What I didn't figure out at the time, that I figured out later on, is that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know it yet. And it might have influenced the classes I took at Sloan for sure. But fast forward a little bit more, first job out of MIT was at a venture firm. So basically we were investing in early stage technologies, primarily focused, given my military background, on spin-outs from research universities and government labs. So we were looking at kind of deep tech, Series A, Series B, seed investing, not much beyond that. And that was just an incredible experience. My focus areas were cybersecurity, mobile wireless communications, satellites. A few of the companies that we funded are still around today doing well. Federated Wireless, which I think Google's an investor there, and Hawkeye 360, which is giving basically mobile wireless communication intelligence to different agencies and also for other commercial applications, run by a good friend who's a CEO. Had an IPO event there, sold one of our cybersecurity companies. So really learned a lot, Zach, about kind of what to think about from a kind of thematic perspective and what are the ingredients for success. And we had plenty of failures in there too, probably more failures than successes. And after doing that for a little bit, ended up managing one of our portfolio companies. Somebody had the idea that maybe I could be an operator, and so showed up to a biotech company. So not only did I know nothing about being a CEO or general manager, really didn't know a lot about biotech at the time either, but found both incredibly gratifying and candidly found my calling. That getting different groups of people, different professionals to row towards a common objective in tandem, that's what I wanted to do. And create value by doing that. And we did that for a couple of years, built a good business, and a company called IDEXX Laboratories came around. So IDEXX is S&P 500, NASDAQ 100 company. It's been a Wall Street darling now for the last, 15 years. I got the role of managing their M&A and strategy team, so the corporate development function and strategy. And like I said before, love animal health, just as a business. Just incredible business model, great management team, and love Portland, Maine as well, which is where I am today, along with my wife and three kids, and my dog Boomer. Funny stories about that too from the weekend, but we won't go there here. And yeah, found my way to animal health. We were buying basically reference labs around the world, sort of reinforced the anecdotes that I'd learned overseas. And for me, that was my first, call it roll up. And we were building, an interconnected system of labs to deliver kind of the laboratory diagnostics for veterinary clinics. We're also buying next generation or licensing next generation diagnostic solutions. So looking in the halls of human medicine to see what solutions they've curated that we could curate for animal health needs. And we had a whole strategy around that. We were also buying software companies. We're probably one of the bigger acquisitors of software companies in animal health, and which is really an extension of what I've been doing, kind of in the venture world. And then we were managing the corporate strategy agenda. And got a really, I think, unique perspective on this category in particular, at a time when a lot of venture growth PE dollars were flowing into the space in different parts of the sector. Fast forward a little bit more, moved over to our chemistry division. It was about a quarter of IDEXX revenue at the time, about $600 million business unit, but about 50% of its free cash flow. It's a critical unit. And man, that's probably one of the best business models I've ever seen. Super sticky, ability to capture price, easily extensible, not a lot of competition, and providing tremendous amount of value for its clients and its end users, actually pets and their owners. And that was my first kind of interaction with, like, what is the state of corporate veterinary medicine? And people like to use the heuristic, it's about 10 years behind human medicine. And I think that's probably generous. And my co-founder and I, Sean, kind of identified an opportunity here, said, hey, if we could unleash the productive power of the providers, create a business model that people actually wanted to be a part of, and execute that systematically, that we would have an easier time recruiting, that we would win. Hold on a second, I'm gonna close the door. So that was kind of the first time I said, hey, I've got an opportunity to build like an exciting business that could revolutionize an industry, bring along investors, and create a tremendous value for all stakeholders. And so Rarebreed was born 2018. I left, took about 6 months, raised about $5.5 million there in the first round, which now sounds like absolutely nothing. Raised, structured a cross-collateralized credit facility. There was with a small regional bank. There was a lot of brain damage, but it was worth it. It ended up giving us, accretive capital to get the deals done that we need to get done. We closed all of that, called Q1 of 2019, bought our first practice in Connecticut in June. And sort of the rest is history. We've gone through, probably 6 or 7 financing events, some, change of control events.
And how much, just sorry to interrupt, but just to give people context, like how much do you think you've raised in aggregate, roughly, if you can say?
Probably about equity capital, 900 million or so. And on the debt side, we're continuing to kind of rethink how we engage there, and we've got some active stuff, but a couple $100 million on the credit side, which you might argue we're over equitized, but at this point in the market, it's a good time to be that from our lens. So today, about 3,000 employees, about 130 locations from Florida to Maine. We're building kind of an integrated model in veterinary care, bringing together specialty, emergency, general practices, continuing to buy aggressively, and also build. So this is a super accretive way we found to grow if you've got the capabilities to actually manage hospitals and grow them organically. Much more cost effective to build and buy, at least today, with prices. And so for us, we really live at the intersection of being an employer of choice. Again, any multi-site healthcare business contingent on the productive power of its providers. So that's number one for us. The second is this idea of the modernization of animal health. We're finding that younger consumers and consumers in general are expecting the same level of medical care for their pets as they are for themselves. So that's been a massive tailwind for us. And, I think we're a leader, frankly, there. And a lot of that comes from our days in the diagnostic world and at IDEXX. Beyond that, integrating technology for a more elegant client experience. And this is where a lot of the real work is happening. But that's sort of Rarebreed in a nutshell. And beyond that, actively investing in a number of different multi-site healthcare businesses, helping entrepreneurs build kind of their dream, active in real estate and a number of other places. And yeah, super excited to have this conversation with you, Zach. But that's sort of me in a nutshell.
That's great. So taking a half step back to when you decided to become a founder, when you realized that was kind of your passion and your calling, when did that happen? And as you started to get into entrepreneurship, how did your training in the military come into play?
No, it's a great question. And the thing I talk to a lot of people about is, people, I think, tend to want autonomy, control, empowerment. But the more of that you have, the more comfortable you have to be in uncertainty and risk. And, the military experience looks, another founder, entrepreneur with a fellow soldier said, look, once you've been shot at or somebody's tried to blow you up, it's kind of hard to get you scared. And I think that's true. And look, the truth is, we're all vulnerable and there are things that are scary. But there's a place for people who can accept and manage that risk and do that effectively. The other key learning from, the Army days is, it's really hard to get people to do what you want them to do, if you don't know how to lead them or manage them. And it turns out we're pretty simple animals. I mean, no pun intended. There's an old saying, hey, make sure your soldiers are fed, they get paid on time, the right amount, and they get to read their mail, and they'll do anything for you. And I think a lot of those lessons carry through to what I do today as a CEO founder. I mean, ultimately, anybody can come up with a spreadsheet and you can change a couple of variables here and there and get the outcome you want, right? The part that a lot of, I think, investors get wrong, and I think the good investors appreciate just how valuable this is. But it's not the chemistry of the system that's challenging. The molecules and atoms are going to do what you need them to do if when applied with the right forces. The challenging part is the biology, getting the people to do what you need them to do. And I think that's the art and science of building a business, being an entrepreneur.
You hit on a couple really key themes that I talk about a lot and that we've talked about offline. And one of them is being comfortable, being uncomfortable. I think as a founder, you just basically are wearing risk 24/7. And until you've been a founder and been in that situation, it's really hard to appreciate how uncomfortable it is. So the only way to survive, I think, is just to get used to it. And it's like everything. It's scary at first. It's difficult at first, but once you've done it enough, it becomes easy. And it's like anything in life. It's like driving or lifting weights or writing a paper. They all become easier over time. They might be hard in the beginning, but to me, that's one of the key things I've learned as a business builder myself is just be willing to do what others won't do. You almost have to always be a contrarian, because if you're starting something innovative, the definition of that is like nothing's really come before it, right? In the sense that it's innovative because it's new, and so you have to be thinking differently. So you have to start with contrarian mindset. Then you have to be willing to wear risk 24/7, and then you have to get comfortable with it, and then you have to be a great leader. To your point. And so to me, there's a lot of ingredients that are necessary, and part of the reason why most startups do fail is because very few people have all those characteristics, or they can't find people to complement them that have the skills that they don't have.
No, it was all really, really great points. I think the more, look, we all know what we have to do, right? If you eat more than you burn, you're going to get fatter. If you don't sleep, you're going to be tired. We know, generally speaking, what the right decisions are. The question is, can we be comfortable making them? And it turns out it's actually, we can take a lot of pain without changing. And you hit the nail on the head. I think the more comfortable you can become being uncomfortable, like that's where the growth is. That's where the growth is. So really well said.
So shifting gears a bit, in terms of the bigger picture in the innovation economy right now, in venture capital land and startup land, what are some of the themes that you're seeing and themes that you're thinking about that are important?
Yeah, it's like such an interesting time. And I think we're feeling this across all different types of asset classes. But overnight, almost, it felt like there was this huge attraction to growth that was like heavily weighted. That's gone from like everybody cares about growth to now the only thing everybody cares about is cash flow. And the pendulum swings. But from my lens, I think the natural bias is towards growth. I mean, I just listening to, Elon Musk's book the other day, his biography by Walter Isaacson, talking about how Wall Street was valuing it at Tesla at more than, I want to say, GM, who had made like a $10 billion profit. And meanwhile, Tesla had lost $2 billion. Just wildly out of whack. I think that theme generally holds true. And this kind of comes in ebbs and flows, but I think we tend to overweight the disruptive power of something new and underweight systems that are actually far more durable than people appreciate. And I see this all the time. Like as a young CEO, I would say I was afraid to let go of somebody who's underperforming. Let's give him a chance. Let's move him somewhere else. What I've learned is that the quicker I can make that decision that I already know I have to make, the better off we're going to be. And that whole doomsday scenario, everything's going to fall apart because everybody liked that person. That's just a story in my head. Systems are actually, in human systems in particular, actually a lot more durable. So, from a innovation economy perspective, I see the world valuing cash flow over growth. To state something of the obvious. And as operators, like I think there's a place. One of the best operators I know is probably the CEO of IDEXX. When I was there, a guy named John Ayers. And he had a framework for innovation, never spend more than 5% of revenue. That's for a massive S&P 500 company. But I think the point is, like, there is a place to continue to learn and grow, but you don't have a viable going concern unless you have a cash flow positive business. Like that is not a self-sufficient entity. If you need capital markets to run your business, you are not a viable business concern yet. And that's okay. But the faster you can get there, the better off you'll be. I did a marathon last year, and the Sugarloaf Marathon. It's actually one of the fastest Boston qualifiers. Super fun run. And there's some uphill, but then there's like a ton of downhill. I got my fastest time, and I was super pumped about that. The bad part was I had to train. We go up north to ski at Sugarloaf, got a place up there, and so I had to train on these like logging roads in the winter. Talk about doing hard things. That sucked. It was just miserable roads with nothing, nowhere to go to the bathroom, just blistering cold, ice everywhere. But the good part about it is I got to listen to a lot of podcasts. You and I were talking about this earlier. And one of the ones that I really love is Founders. And I kept hearing this common theme with guys like Carnegie and Rothschild and Rockefeller. Like the theme I came away with as an operator of businesses is at the end of the day, the only thing you can actually control are your costs. Like that's the only thing you have true power of, what you spend every day. And it's hard, like there are a lot of hard things in entrepreneurship we talk about. It's hard to let go of your friend or demote or, whatever decision you have to make that's, you're no longer paying someone or something to do something for you. But the more comfortable you can get with actually managing that side of the question, the closer you are to viability. So other themes in kind of innovation that are interesting to me, obviously the AI one is bigger, but I think the bigger piece for that, as it relates to my realm, which I broadly call multi-site healthcare and provider-led businesses, is my hypothesis that the owners of brick and mortar are going to benefit asymmetrically over the short to medium run. I think that's one big theme as you automate functions that are marginally value add. So we pay a lot of people to sort of, one of the critical failure points in our, call it, hospital system is answering the phones. And we owe it to our team to make sure that we're incentivizing them appropriately, training them appropriately. But the truth is, all non-administrative support costs dilute the margin. And the value, I think the ROI of every dollar you spend there is kind of questionable. That's a great place where I believe AI and other machine technologies will benefit the owners of kind of hospitals and provider-led businesses. So
let's dig into this.
Yeah.
I want to dig into this because this is a theme I've talked about previously on podcasts, because a lot of people have brought up AI because it's very topical. I have a couple of friends in Davos right now, and they're like, look, every conversation is about AI. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're running countries or sweeping floors, you're talking about AI because it's going to impact you in some way. And my view has been and remains that it's not good from an investment perspective to try to chase direct investments in AI companies or companies that specialize in AI, because I think that's going to be dominated by the behemoths, like the Microsofts of the world. Like, they've got so many resources, they've got hundreds of billions that they can put behind this over time. And I don't think there's anybody that's going to come along that's going to independently at a much smaller scale, like, do something better than they can do. But I think that the opportunity lies in finding businesses, to your point, that I think you said very well, that will disproportionately benefit by using AI, which they can harness very cheaply in many cases, to reduce costs in repetitive or non-core functions, or kind of low value but necessary functions, right? Around data or many other things, right? And so that's where I think the smart investors should be looking, and maybe some are. Most people I found are not. They just chase the shiny object, and they're going to lose their shirts like they always do. But the folks that are actually really tuned in to where there's long-term value are saying, okay, where are there sustainable, durable business models that already work, that can harness AI and improve their operating margins immensely overnight? And a lot of their competitors won't, because they're too big or too slow or too anchored to what they did in the past to adapt. And so if you're flexible and agile and nimble and willing to change, right, willing to take that next step into utilizing AI, I think you're going to have a massive competitive advantage. And we already see in the financial industry where I am. Like, I can compete against firms that are 500 times bigger in terms of assets and blow them out of the water, because it takes them 3 years to do what I can literally do in 3 hours. And I'm not exaggerating.
Absolutely, Zach. I mean, I agree. And for me, clearly this is one of those areas. And I think there are plenty others where, to your point, fighting, the way I like to describe it is, it's not a good strategy if you're the Continental Army to fight the British in a traditional European style war head on. You're probably going to lose, right? They're better trained, they've got better weapons. But if you can figure out a way to fight asymmetrically, like that's the arbitrage. And for me as an operator, what are the non-value add costs but are table stakes that have gone away because the friction's reduced, because now we have thinking animals. And then there's this whole other, like, what's now enabled as well: decision support, client experience. And I think it's both of those. But the first wave that I'm seeing actually start to change the business, like, directly, is kind of the cost reduction side. And so, we have the infrastructure, the connectedness to pass along information. Like, where are the humans in the loop slowing it down? They're adding low value cost. And there's a bunch of places we can go, from that perspective. But I'm like salivating, like, I want to be right now, I want to be an asset owner, like, full stop.
So question for you around AI. There's been a lot of consultants or thought leaders, so to speak, that have said that AI is going to really hurt the white collar senior people more than the blue collar or mid-level people. Do you believe in that? I actually think quite the opposite. I think the senior people are, most of them are still going to be there, but all the kind of middle managers are going to be gone, and there's going to be a lot fewer junior people. And anything that's what I call basic or mechanical or very process driven, that's that's gonna be automated away. And I think all the people that you see at banks, for instance, that sit in the back and middle office, and even some of the quote producers on the front lines are gonna be pretty irrelevant pretty quickly. But I'm curious what your take is.
Yeah, I think just like spreadsheets or mobile phones, I think it's going to make the productive power of each individual greater, which means the bias is going to be fewer of them, but better ones. And I think that I think at the lower level. And I'm thinking like, an investment bank or a consulting firm or like operations at a, at an S&P 500 company or, an associate at a fund. I think the productive power of the knowledge worker is going to increase asymmetrically. At the senior level, it's an interesting question. I think the best just as an operator, and I'm biased, but the highest ROI positions are actually the most senior ones. And the reason for that is you got to perform two critical functions. One, you got to set a vision and a strategy. You got to build an accountability framework. You got to build a team. You got to make sure you have money. You got to manage your stakeholders, right? And in order to do that well, I think the best strategies are set are not by the ones who can come up with the best answers. And that fundamentally is what AI does. The best, at least in its current manifestation, that may change over time. And I think that's the doomsday scenario. But just assume for a minute, like, okay, this is the status quo. Like the best managers and leaders ask the best questions. And as far as I can see, that is not something that NLP or generative AI can do yet. What are the right questions to ask in order to get the organization to think or answer the highest priority questions to yield the highest ROI? We're not there yet. And that's the critical function of senior management. And actually, that's a massive delta I see between like a C-level executive and even like a VP or a director. Like a director typically lacks the global perspective, the financial acumen, which that part can be trained, but the ability to ask the right questions versus being directed and going and executing the question that's being asked or the answer that's provided. And so that differentiates the great companies from the okay ones, from my lens.
I agree, and I think senior leaders that are good are very forward looking, right? Because they have to be to remain at the forefront. And I don't know if AI will get better, and I'm sure it will. But to date, it's very good at being backward looking. It's not as good at creative thinking, forward looking thinking, innovative thinking. And that's where I think the best leaders are right now, and that's why they're going to still have a place.
100%, Zach. Just on the innovation topic, there's one other theme that I think is germane, and I'd love to love to mention. I think it's sort of related to this idea of multi-site healthcare and the owners of brick and mortar. But like as I think about it, it's the owners of its terrestrial, tangible businesses that are going to benefit. Sort of the most, which is sort of interesting because those have been the ones that have suffered the most probably over the last 20, 25 years. You've got wage inflation, which hasn't kept up with your ability to pass through price or value. And the beneficiaries over the last 20 years, by virtue of mobile wireless communication technology and the internet, have been like these kind of switchboard, multi-sided business models that like are winner take all, that are charging a toll. Uber's, Spotify, like Spotify doesn't do anything. You get a subscription and then somebody lets you lease their like, it's not actually doing anything. Like maybe it picks a couple good songs that I wouldn't have known about. Maybe it can kind of figure out what I might like, but that feels like it's becoming a commodity. Uber, Airbnb, like great business models. Like they have asset light, very profitable, very scalable. Those have been the darlings over the last 20 years. I think that's about to change. That's my strong hypothesis. That's the terrestrial businesses that are actually creating something, service or product, that are gonna be the beneficiaries from my lens.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of people have gotten anchored to this idea that to be a great startup, you have to be in a winner take all market. You have to be the one or maybe the second or third, and there's no room for others. And I think that's where there's a lot of misconceptions. Like I remember I was talking to some person about venture debt and ARI's Venture Debt Opportunities Fund, and this was probably like, I don't know, a year ago. And venture debt continues to gain recognition and people start to understand it better and better. But for the most part, I would say 95% of institutional investors have no idea how it works, right? And most founders don't either, really. And I remember this guy saying, well, how are you going to compete with SVB? As if like there's not room for more than one capital provider in the market. And I said to him, do you know how many regional banks there are in the US? Do you know how many savings and loan institutions there are in the US? Do you know how many private lenders there are in the US? They're not staying out of the market because they're worried about if they can compete with JP Morgan, right?
That's what gives me hope, Zach, that there's more opportunity and arbitrage than we could ever hope. The other, on a similar vein, something I've learned, and I'm probably somewhat guilty of it too, to be honest with you, I'm being aware or self-aware. It's like the one who is the arbiter of capital or the acquirer is always smarter than the acquiree. And I think it's important for capital allocators, LPs, investors, and honestly, acquirers of businesses to appreciate, like, look, how can I approach this from a position of curiosity? What can I learn? And I think the one who can do that is going to be the one that wins. What I've learned about being an entrepreneur, man, is like, it is a humbling exercise. Get things wrong all the time. And it's not your ability necessarily to get things right more often than wrong, but what can you learn from what you did get wrong that's going to make you better tomorrow? Like that's a just massive lesson, going back to the other topic we talked about. And that's actually where I see a lot of entrepreneurs fail. It's like they can't get away from this notion that they have to be right. So anyway.
I want to hit on two things that you just said there that I think are really critical. One is that really what you're saying is we are the sum of the totality of our decisions, right? In other words, how successful we are in life is based on all the decisions we've made to date. Right?
And we make 14,000 every day.
Yeah, and I always say that the long run is a series of short runs. So when people say, "Well, I want to do this in the long run," but that's a long run move. So I'm not going to do anything now in the short run. I think that's kind of it doesn't really make any sense logically, because the long run is a series of short runs. Like to get to a destination, you have to take one step after another to get there. You don't just like magically like float there on Aladdin's carpet, right?
And I love that, Zach. Just on that point, one of my favorite quotes somebody told me was like, yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, today is all you got. And actually, like, if you take a step back and think about that for a second, like, the only thing I have at all in the whole universe is this moment right here. And to your point, like, tomorrow is an aggregation of what compounds today. So anyway, I love that. And every day could be your last day. And that's, by the way, that's the journey of an entrepreneur founder too. We talked a little bit about like investing and how to think about that. And the key ingredient from my perspective, and like having sat on both sides, as a VC and as an entrepreneur, is like, who do you have at the helm? That is the number one, from my lens, indicator of success or failure. And you can pick a highly competitive business, a not super competitive business where you're the first mover. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Just the person you have at the helm, can they set a strategy and a vision? Can they build a team and a culture? Can they manage their stakeholders? Can they build an accountability framework? And can they make sure they have capital to run the business? And man, that is really hard to do. Like, that's the thing that's going to indicate success or failure. You got to find somebody who's going to do it or die trying.